All right. Welcome, of course, to XRP Las Vegas, everybody. Big one. A big shout out also to Brad and Danielle for putting on this amazing event. So big round of applause there, guys. Come on. Let's go for it. Let's go for it. All right, you've met the panel today, so we're going to break it down and really kind of just dive into the topic. Of course, Andy, I want to kind of talk with you first. We had a chance to talk about this a little bit out front. But the shift that we're seeing right now around digital assets and physical assets. Now, of course, Florida's put a chip in the game. And we're seeing other states, and Jason will talk about that in a second. But Andy, what do you see as far as the implication of what Florida's trying to do with gold coming in as an exchange of money?
It's huge. I mean, it's legitimizing gold from a standpoint of a government recognizing its value. And really, it is, the way the bill is drafted, it's tailor-made for digital gold. It does have provisions for physical gold, but in terms of ease of transaction, in terms of liquidity and utility, it speaks to really opportunity in the digital gold space. But it's huge. It's legitimizing metal in a form that I didn't know that I'd ever see. We get to a point where it's actually being called legal tender for all debts, public and private, even paying your property taxes within the state. So it's the beginning of something big.
So obviously this is going to be one of the things where the idea of tokenized gold is going to become most likely a reality, because that will most likely be the way that this gets into the market. Jason, I know you've done some work within this area. Share with us your findings and some of the challenges too.
Well, I told you all last year that this was going to happen. And of course, a few weeks ago, Arkansas was the first state in America to be able to make transactional electronic gold legal tender. And of course, on Tuesday this week, and I think it's important that it was on this week when we have the XRP conference, Tuesday, DeSantis signed the Florida bill into being. So we now have, for the first time ever, the second authorized currency of the United States of America is gold. I mean,
there you go.
Believe that? And I said last year that it was down to you. You know, this is your destiny in your hands. And sure enough, you know, the legislators are going to vote on something they think that you want. And I'm sure some of you got in touch with your legislators. That was the grassroots movement that was sweeping across America last year. It was a privilege for me to see it, a privilege for me to be part of it. And the biggest contribution that I made was being able to go to House and Senate committee meetings across America, Kansas and Utah and Texas and Florida, and explain to people that one of the challenges they had was, how is this going to work? This is impossible.
Right.
How can you make gold money? You know, this is ridiculous. And showing them, look, with Glint, of course you can. It's really easy. Do you want to go for a coffee? And actually, in state by state, that's often what I saw. The state treasurers, or actually normally the deputy treasurer. State treasurer would go, this is fantastic, get on with this. Over to the deputy treasurer. He'd walk out the room, the deputy treasurer would go, no way, we're going to need more time for this. And we'd say, listen, do you want to go for a coffee or something? And we'd go and buy something with gold using the Glint card. And suddenly it was like, we need to get this done yesterday.
Yeah.
So that was one problem that we needed to challenge with. The other one, and it's a lesson, I think, for the world, and it's a lesson that spans any kind of sound money advocacy, whether it's crypto, whether it's gold, is that don't fight amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, this is crazy. Even within the gold, Bitcoin stuff, that's rubbish, if you ask me. Certainly within crypto, or even within the gold industry, people fighting for something. It's like, hey, get behind what is happening. Iterative improvements help everybody in the sound money space. This gold legislation, which is, let's just be clear what it is. This is authorizing at the state level the ability for using gold as currency, and with a bunch of protections around that. Trust, because the state's backing it and making sure your gold's there and things like that. Government close to the people is better for the people. Taking, you all know, a lot of you will know that in 1930, when was it banned? 1933 to 1975. Crazy that it was banned, but it was. So the state has the ability to protect against taking from federal government. And of course, last but not least, taxes. You know, this legislation should allow the IRS to be able to drop capital gains tax away from transactional gold. Why should you be paying 28% just for maintaining your purchasing power? It's an outrage. It's a moral injustice. It's even in the Bible millions of times, unjust weights and measures like anathema to the Lord. This is outrageous, and this lays the path now for capital gains tax at the IRS to fall away. The thing that they really were trying to fight, the thing that was worrying states was I just looked on the debt clock. Has everyone had a look at it recently? I mean, I'm wondering if it's going to hit 37 trillion today. I mean, it's so close. $37 trillion. I mean, you've got a good explanation.
Trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago.
Can you say that again?
31,688 years ago. It's a
Amazing.
trillion seconds. Hey, didn't in that bill, didn't they say there's no sales tax in Florida if you use gold and silver?
No sales tax in Florida.
Yeah.
So, so when you look at this evolution of really a transition in the monetary system, which is now starting to shift. And Lynette will kind of go that direction here, because this is an opportunity. When you look at digital assets, the potential of digital gold becoming a major play, and now a mindset that is being reprogrammed to maybe a whole new set of investors that are coming up. Where do you see this market just in the next few years?
Well, I see more states adopting it and putting pressure on the federal government to adopt it. And what I'm really fighting for is to get it part of the new system, because you're absolutely right. We are transitioning into a new monetary system. And having some gold can put some checks and balances back on that system. So this 37 trillion, and we didn't even talk about all the derivatives on there, but they can't do that. They cannot spend our wealth. So we need to get gold back in the system, and it must be, here's the piece though, it has to be redeemable. And so I have a concern that even if it's in there, it's not redeemable, so it doesn't mean anything. So I think it's critically important what's happening in the state level, and it is a grassroots, and we have to kind of go both ways. And I think education is really the key.
Yeah.
Because people don't know what sound money is.
No.
Well, and good point. And I think the key here, when you look at each of your companies and also just what you guys have seen just in the last few years, this massive shift towards the mindset of an investor. You know, you look at the XRP investors out here, whether they're Bitcoin, you look at all the altcoins that are starting to float in the market, obviously gold, a clear digital asset potential in the future. When you see a basket like that, Andy, and you and I have talked about this, how does that group unite in terms of really, because really it's getting away from the US dollar.
Well,
it's moving into a new system.
Well, I'll tell you how it unites. So I had a discussion with Judy Shelton, who was Trump's nominee to run the Federal Reserve in 2016. Many think she will replace Powell when his tenure is up. And she said to me, first of all, we have to understand the United States has become a net importer of gold since November. Month over month over month over month, the May contract was the largest delivery ever into the history of the COMEX market. These are huge, huge amounts. It was over $8 billion worth of gold was delivered. You got to ask yourself, who's got that bread? So she said to me, Andy, in no uncertain terms, I was told by President Trump that on July 4th, 2026, the 250th anniversary of the United States, he will issue gold-backed treasuries that are redeemable at the end of the duration. And then now to your point, how do they meld? She says, it is my belief and my hope that the industry will then create stable coins that will be issued off of these gold-backed treasuries. It's obvious that the path to a new monetary system is a marriage, as Zoltan Pozsar says, Bretton Woods III, a system about transparency in commodities. It'll be a marriage between blockchain technology and something like gold, in my belief, to bring the two communities together and to provide transparency and credibility.
Yeah, so you're talking about some interesting things that could be happening on the stablecoin side of things. And Lynette, if you look at the potential here now of shifting to whether it is a treasury-backed stablecoin, if you look at what is happening with Tether, which is mostly, I guess, now moving more and more into Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, where do you see the delineation of a US stablecoin and how that falls in? Do you feel like it's going to be more on the treasury side, or back to your point, on the side of gold?
Well, I hope that it's more, right now what it looks like is it's going to be backed by dollars to create another market for dollars, since the current market for dollars is kind of going away.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the first step that I see, and that just keeps the dollar back in the system. But the dollar has no purchasing power value left. So there has to be a change. It's not like there's really an option about this. When things aren't working anymore, there must be change. I'd love to see a stablecoin actually backed by, again, I'm going to say it, redeemable gold. Because if it's not redeemable, like we saw in Zimbabwe, it doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
Then it is simply pegged to whatever artificial price they want to put on it in terms of any currency. So I would love to see a stablecoin backed by gold, but not just backed, redeemable. I'm so strong on that.
And the good news is that the legislation across these states very clearly says this needs to be redeemable. And I think it's up to the industry, you guys and us and others, to make sure that the process for that is as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's easy. That's
easy.
That's the smallest bit of the problem. The first one was passing the legislation.
Right, right.
I'm a little worried when you guys say easy. I don't
Well, I mean, it also the whole argument against these types of programs is who's storing it and in what fashion, and is it redeemable?
Yeah.
And if it's stored in a vault across the globe, how easy is it? If you're talking the state of Texas or the state of Florida who's auditing it, who's saying it's there one-to-one, and it makes it redeemable, it is revolutionary, I think, to both industries. And you know, to Jason's point, what I said last year too, there is no reason that these two communities have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
It becomes a much stronger message if we're united together. It isn't one or the other. It's not for me personally, and it shouldn't be for all of us.
Yeah. Let's talk regulation, because obviously the Genius Act is on the precipice of being addressed, possibly even as early as Monday, which could mean stablecoins for the United States, which will start to shift most likely the strategy of a lot of our financial institutions, including the existing architecture we have right now. You look at that, Lynette, we'll start with you down there. When you think about that happening in DC next week, what does that do to the markets right now? Because it's still very early on the idea of stablecoin usage.
Well, stablecoins are being really adopted in third world countries, the US dollar stablecoins, and that's who really backs most, what is it, something like 99% of all stablecoins are dollar backed. So I think, you know, again, I go back to the dollar is really dying, and it's been dying since it was born, really. That's not something new. And I think I would really love to see gold back in this system, but I think we've got a bumpy road. I don't think it's going to be so easy.
Yeah, so
because these transitions are never easy. We have to break things down in order to build them back up. And really, what gold and silver in your possession at this point does, it's your bridge. It's your bridge from one system into the next system.
Right.
That's all. That part's easy.
I think the challenge, you know, the struggle that we've gone through right now just to get to regulatory frameworks that we have today.
That's true.
And it still hasn't really gone through yet. So Jason, you've had a chance to go elbow to elbow with these guys in terms of the lawmakers, at least on the state level. When you see a federal legislation that's moving forward, the likelihood is we're probably going to see some states follow this, okay? What do you see in the way of state evolution around, maybe to Lynette's point, of how this could go down the road in terms of maybe getting a gold-backed stablecoin, looking at other digital assets that could be gold, or backing stablecoins? Could that happen in states quicker?
Yeah, so I think that there's the movement that, you know, leaders like Florida and Arkansas leading the way. I hope Texas leads the way with this transactional gold stuff. And it's creating confidence with legislators and lawmakers and bureaucrats in other states to move forward. Because if I go back a year and a half if I go back before this administration came in, I think there was a lot of excitement around what could be done, but they were expecting a fight.
Right.
So attorney generals, if you had an attorney general in a state who was up for a fight, and some of them were, then you were probably going to get the legislation moving forward. I think some of those attorney generals may be a little bit disappointed. They're not going to have the scrap they were looking for. But what it's doing is I can already see now with the legislature, so these are the state representatives in your state who are taking this type of thing forward, looking at what's happening with gold now at a constitutional currency level, thinking what else can we do? Can we do gold-backed bonds? What can we do? Can we pay taxes in gold? And what else can we do? It's exciting. I know that the Bitcoin community have literally been copying nearly word for word the gold currency legislation and swapping out the word gold for Bitcoin. And I think that's okay. You know, you've got to stand on the shoulders of giants. But I think this is the point, is that it's an iterative process now. It's happening. The ball started rolling. It was very difficult to get this ball rolling. We've all got to keep it moving. You've got this fantastic legislation at the federal level. Definitely the state legislators are getting excited. Their imagination's being ignited. And there's going to be all kinds of legislation behind it. But again, I've seen the struggle that these representatives have. They're trying to convince their other brethren, the other people, their brothers and sisters in the legislative apparatus, say, you get behind my bill. Right. There's a whole lot of horse trading going on and stuff sometimes with these bills. It's a very, very difficult process. And I take my hat off to the legislators like Doug Bance in Florida, who's got this across the line. It's a thankless task. No one will know merely who he is. If you watch the video, you'd have seen him up having the signature with DeSantis. And this is Ken Ivory as well in Utah, who then had the bill vetoed by the governor. It's the first time in history, I think, that a governor has vetoed a bill that was unanimously passed.
Yeah.
Now, how do you give your representatives the power to do this for you? Well, you tell them, you ring them up, you email them, you sign up to pledges. That gives them the power, because when other people vote for this on the Senate or House floor or in these committees, they know that if they go against it, they're going to have a backlash from their community. So you really do have the power. And I think there's been this federal kind of monopoly on what happens at the legislative level for such a long time that people have forgotten that actually you have this wonderful system in America where the state keeps balance with the federal government and vice versa. And the state power, I think, is coming back into resurgence. And again, that's closer to the people, that's closer to you. You can speak to your state representative. And whatever you're into, talk to them about it. Come to them with ideas, not half-baked ideas. Pull together, you've got great communities, you can pull things into structures and you can get them in front of the representatives, get them excited. Someone will take it on, they'll take it into the House or the Senate, whether that's about cryptocurrency, XRP, whether it's about gold, whatever it's about. You have that opportunity right now.
For sure.
The momentum's there.
Well, and I think now we're dealing with, a lot of the audience that is out here, they're looking at this transition and shift towards what could be, like we've said, a new monetary system starting to form right before our very eyes.
Yeah.
And which is a great time. You guys are all in the right place at the right time, the right room at the right time, because we're in that flux right now. Andy, when you think about next steps, we already see a very pro-crypto, pro-digital asset, administration right now. A little struggle in getting some of these bills, whether we get the Market Structure Act going through, Genius Act. But what would be the next regulatory, hurdle that you think the industry has to take?
I think it would come from the federal side. I mean, I don't know what it is, but there's something very different happening with gold in the way that it's being not only imported, 40 nations from around the world have repatriated their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed and brought it home. The acquisition by the central banks, to me, is incredibly telling. They're the most well-informed traders in the world. Forget about how much money they have. They know the playbook. The central banks are buying. The United States is importing. The central banks are repatriating. We used to leave our gold at the Bank of England to give direct access to the LBMA. We'd leave our gold at the New York Fed to give direct access to the COMEX. Well, we'll pass that up, thank you. The system has lost trust, and it's centered around weaponization of the treasury market and irresponsible fiscal policy that has made much of the world say, it's time for a change. It's time for a new monetary system. It's time for a reset. And you can tell if you look closely enough that whoever is behind this, I think, believes that gold should be part of the system. And the only way that you can make this work is to be transparent. What better way to do it than something like XRP or some form of of an open ledger for everyone to see, to inspire confidence. And to Lynette's point, that would be, you know, you make it redeemable. The only issue with redemption is that, you know, guys like Charles de Gaulle proved that redeemable currencies redeem, and that, you know, you have to be prepared for that. So I've always felt that one way around that, if we weren't going to redeem it, we're going to make it one step, would certainly be to have it shown on a distributed ledger, to have it shown that it's there and have it audited. But I think it has to come from a federal level. I really do believe that that is the next step. And, you know, when you look at Scott Bessent and the comments that he made saying that in this administration we'll see a new monetary system, a new Bretton Woods, as he called it. You look at Judy Shelton, you look at Senator Loomis from Wyoming, Lummis, I believe it is, who talked about revaluing gold in order to provide enough, some of the proceeds to go to a Bitcoin strategic account. How many people know that gold is held on the balance sheet in the United States in an account called the Gold Revaluation Account? And that's the name of it. It's been revalued 3 times since 1933. So the point of it is that I believe that the federal level is where it will stem from. And using the crumbs that are there, it just seems as though it is in the Trump's administration's plans to reintegrate gold into the system and potentially even revalue it, at least market to market, if not greater, to back a new system that would inspire confidence, give them the ability to pay down the debt, and go from there. So
let's talk about global markets before we get into the payment side of things, because that starts to stem into cross-border payments, obviously with what Ripple has been able to do very successfully. Lynette, when you look at the potential here of what could be a much more fluid use of whether it's gold or digital assets that are related to gold, now starting to form in all the Western countries, are you in any concern of the West just getting stronger and stronger, where, you know, crypto, if you think about it, has really kind of leveled the playing field in a lot of emerging countries? What are your thoughts on that? Because gold is kind of in the premium side of the top countries.
Well, hasn't it? And it's he who holds the gold holds the power.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, really knowing how much gold there is in Fort Knox, we aren't really hearing very much about that audit. But if we actually did an audit.
Why do you think that is? I'm going to ask the question.
You know,
Why
I
do you
mean,
think
it can be sitting right there. What we don't know are all of the contracts and who really has the ownership, unless it's, you know, ownership is 9/10 of the, or if you hold it, that's 9/10 of the law. But I think this is a huge opportunity for the U.S. to regain its position, so to speak. We have this opportunity because I feel like even though we have the deepest and most liquid markets, we also see our allies turning away because of all of the chaos that's happening.
Yep.
And that has me really concerned because chaos means uncertainty. And I couldn't even sit here and tell you that something hasn't already been triggered that can overwhelm the system, because I don't know that. And there's so much that we can't see as citizens or as people that's going on. I mean, the derivatives market, that's an opaque market.
Yep.
We can't, so you're talking about 37 trillion. Well, what about all the derivatives that are written against that? How much is that? How many quadrillions is that? So the gold revaluation account, which every country has one, could be used, but the reality is that there's no more purchasing power left in the dollar. And so they must now start attacking principle and shift into a new system. And the digital assets, there are so many advantages, but there's also a lot of disadvantages. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I don't understand code. So could I be taken advantage of because I don't understand it? So that's part of the problem. And by the way, I do agree with you, Andy, that redeemable will be redeemed, but isn't that what keeps things legal and on the up and up? Our politicians, our central bankers, we need, as the citizens, we need to take the power back.
Okay, so you've got...
have to.
Take the power back. I like that. That's going to be a soundbite now. We'll play that on the show next week. Okay, so I want to kind of touch on this, Jason and Andy. Japan, of course, now having a pretty major bond meltdown.
Oh.
You look at the amount of U.S. treasuries that are at stake, potentially. Could this accelerate the U.S. into a forced hand going forward in terms of what's happening in this asset class?
I believe so, absolutely. And just 2 weeks ago, the Chinese announced their renminbi bridge program, which is M-Bridge, and they connected 11 Asian nations, the countries in Southeast Asia, and 5 or 6 Middle Eastern nations that represent 38% of global trade with this new M-Bridge technology. 7 seconds clearing time versus the 3 days typical for a cross-border SWIFT payment system that goes through intermediary banks. And the theory behind it is that they will trade with one another over this bridge system, local currencies, and settle imbalances in gold. And the Shanghai Metals Exchange just came out and said they're going to internationalize the exchange, starting with depositories in Saudi Arabia and Hong Kong. So the idea would be we trade digital yuan for oil from Saudi Arabia and have our vault, a Shanghai vault in Saudi Arabia, whereby the imbalances can be settled with gold. And in other words, it's not SWIFT compatible. Well, the Chinese are also connected to the Belt Road Initiative. They're connected to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union. You put all these groups together, it's 90% of human population. Now, why would I say that? The key to all of this, when you talk about bang, everything just collapses with the debt market, it is because Sergei Lavrov has just come out, he's the Russian finance minister, and said, we are now opening this up, this technology, to non-BRICS members.
Yeah.
To non-BRICS members. Okay, so who's all connected to the BRICS? The Belt Road, which is 75% of human population. They've already got the Asiatic countries and the countries in the Middle East, which is 38%. The BRICS themselves are almost 50%. You put all of these countries together with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional financial organization in the world, and the Eurasian Economic Union, and bang, you have 9 out of 10 people on the planet who are now connected to a system that does not require or is not compatible with SWIFT and clears in 7 seconds and settling imbalances in gold. They want to internationalize the yuan and gold and open throughout all of these countries in Africa, in Asia, and South America, branches of the Shanghai Metals Exchange to settle imbalances in gold. And that's why all of these countries have been producing, accumulating, and repatriating gold. And I believe someone said to Trump, listen, we're going to get our ass kicked if we do not do the same thing. That is why month over month over month over month since November, we've seen record imports of gold into this country. Again, it's not the money, it's the information. The people at that level know the playbook. And the question, this is 4 feet of snow in Death Valley in June, the amount of gold that's come into this country since November. It does not happen. It's never happened since World War II when everyone sent us their gold due to the Bretton Woods deal. It's the most gold that's been imported since World War II, yet no one talks about it. Why doesn't the mainstream talk about it? It's because they are preparing, I believe, like to your point, is their hand going to be forced? Yeah, I think that's what they're doing. They're like, if we don't get this, we're in trouble because these other countries are draining the world's exchanges.
So you mentioned M-Bridge. Why, am I correct that they stepped away from that, though?
The BIS stepped away from M-Bridge. It's a Chinese technology. It was developed for 4 years with China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE through the BIS Innovation Hub. And the BIS, as far as I'm concerned, did what amounts to espionage. At the 12th hour, Augustus Carsons, he looks like Augustus from Willy Wonka grown up, and he says, we cannot be part of a technology that allows countries to sidestep Western sanctions, as if he just thought that, just realized after 4 years that Russia was the RM BRICS.
Yeah.
And they pulled out, and so now they call it the bridge. It's the M-Bridge technology that China developed, but the BIS, which is a Western institution, really, I think, upset the BRICS nations. So the information that used to be everywhere and plentiful, you have to dig so hard to find it. And I'm reading sites in China and sites in Russia and sites all throughout, anywhere but the United States, to get this information, which they're keeping close to the vest as a result of that.
Geez, this is deep.
I-
I'm going to have to read 2 new books for this.
But I think you also need to look closer to home. In Utah, they had a work group on transactional gold currency.
Yeah.
And who was on that? Well, a couple of Wall Street's industry titans. You know, you had Gary Crittenden, former CFO of American Express, and you had Randy Quarles, former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
All coming out publicly at the end of that saying, look, we think people should have the ability to spend gold.
Yeah.
And I think the vibe that I got from them was that we've kind of given up on the idea that the dollar is a store of value.
Yeah.
It's about
I
time.
think we got that.
But the battle is now for the medium of exchange.
Well, okay, well, let's talk about payment. We got a few minutes left here, okay? Payment is the big question. Everybody's looking at how do you alternatively reset the payment system. Card companies like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they've been pretty much feasting on a lot of the merchants and online commerce for quite a while. Maybe stablecoin represents a new opportunity. Maybe digitized gold represents a new opportunity. Lynette, when you look at that and the potential, if you think about what's happening on the XRP ledger, there's a lot of new development around point of sale. My background a lot with building point of sale with Microsoft. This could mean the new gateway for a new digital architecture of payment other than the US dollar. How would you see that happening in real time? Go in there.
How would I see that happening? I think it's really already happening. I think the banking system has been they're feasting on tokens and tokenizing everything. So I think, and it's instant, no matter both sides of the transaction. So I think that we're all going to be surprised one day when all of a sudden they just
Flip the switch.
flip the switch. They've been working on it. But, but when they flip the switch, there's going to be a lot. This isn't that easy.
Yeah.
Like, the switch is flipped and now everything is hunky-dory. It doesn't really work like that. The system that's in place right now must be torn down. But I do think that they're already working on that so rapidly that I do think that it will be that fast.
Man.
But I think it'll also be that painful for most people.
Well, and I think the key here is this transition, because we do webinars all the time, and the amount of business owners that are coming into this today asking the question of, I want to start taking digital assets. I want to be able to start taking alternative assets in the market, getting away from the US dollar. Is that really within our next few years reach, do you think, Jason? Where this could really
Florida's bill is supposed to come into being in June 26.
So now.
So 12 months. It's a 12-month countdown. We're moving at speed. You know? But I think talking to a lot of my kind of advisors and stuff, they thought it would be slowly, and it would be a gradual type of change.
Oh, that's what they said about the internet.
Yeah, but the same people, I'm talking about some people who are very connected at the highest levels, have said to me, Jason, I can't believe how fast this is unraveling.
It's fast.
I now realize that this has to happen quickly.
Interesting.
But I do think that legislators and government in general were quite happy that a lot of this legislation that was being passed was there was this lot of mention of, the debit card. And the debit card. And they're happy about that because then the merchants can still receive dollars because it's this exchange happening, this foreign currency exchange happening effectively between the alternative asset and the incumbent. But of course, it's the peer-to-peer network, the independent of the dollar system, that is the threat to that. And I think one of the things that people, unless you're really in the industry, underestimate a lot is regulation. You've seen how powerful a hindrance that can be under the last administration to development. And it's not just as easy as to say, we're going to have lots of, I say it sometimes, hey, you can send gold as easy as sending a text. The reality is then there's a whole regulatory industry over the top of that, making sure that there's no anti-money laundering, making sure there's no fraud, et cetera. And that's a real thing. We have to protect our customers. So I think that I think they might be right. It's happening slowly, but then it might happen very fast.
Yeah, for sure. Last question to you guys. Hester Pierce was on stage at another event. We won't mention that one, but she made a statement, and it was all about the potential of getting out of KYC for decentralized finance and also alternative markets out there. When you look at the possibility, especially of what's happened here recently with the major exchange where a lot of personal information was essentially social engineered, what about that in the sense of getting to a point where no KYC would be required, especially for these honeypots that are starting to exist? Are you pro in that stance? We'll start with you,
I don't
Andy.
think there's a chance in hell that happens. I mean, I was involved with a company called TradeWinds 7-8 years ago, and it was the first, it's the One Gold app that people may know. It was Royal Canadian Mint using a permission-based distributed ledger, which to me wasn't really anything special because it was permission-based. And the reason that it was permission-based and not sent out to the Coinbases of the world and opened up so that everyone could do it in a decentralized manner is the Royal Canadian Mint refused to say, I'm not going to let my gold get accumulated by Pablo Escobar kind of thing, that we produce. So the KYC AML thing is massive, at least as far as I'm concerned, in this industry when it comes to the point that Lynette brings up, the delivery.
Yeah.
So the token can go everywhere, but when someone comes to me who I don't know who they are and say, I need $3 million worth of gold, here are my tokens, if we're not doing KYC AML, you're going to get a knock on your door very quickly. I don't know how you get around that. I have no idea. The redemption side is where it has to.
Would you agree with that, Lynette?
I do agree with it, which is also why I think you need to hold it and own it and be very private with it. But yeah, I can see the problem with the redemption side. However, you still need a tool to hold their toes to the fire, meaning the government and the central bankers. You got to have a tool. What tool do we have?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the point, I think.
What tool do we have? I mean, really, that's the big problem that I see. The public, the big corporations have lots of tools. The governments have lots of tools. What does the people have?
Right now, nothing.
Exactly.
Other than what we're building now within the digital ecosystem, which I think is the thing that has really started to startle. Maybe the more we talk to lawmakers, they are surprised at the movement that's happened here, especially in the United States, with people like in this room that have pretty much just taken control of their own future and said, we're going to run it this way. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Listen, we're gonna end on that. So we can stay on time for the guys here. But guys, give everybody a round of applause.
Way to go. Thanks, Paul.
Anyway, we're going to get into another session here shortly. So give us a few seconds and we'll transition as we go forward.